Ladies and gentlemen, there's a peculiar myth circulating in the world of relationships, one that promises power and resolution through silence. The idea of no contact, a tactic employed to assert dominance or spark longing, has seduced many into believing that withdrawal equals strength. But silence, when wielded poorly, is not strength. It is avoidance. It is the abdication of responsibility. And in its weakest form, it's a silent cry for validation, hoping the other person will notice your absence and come running. But what if I told you there was a better way? A way rooted in truth, in personal growth, and in the undeniable force of taking conscious action. It's not about retreating into the shadows, hoping to be seen. It's about standing firmly in the light, shaping the narrative and confronting the reality of who you are and what you deserve. The strength of your relationships, like the strength of your character, is not built on passive strategies but on courageous choices. When you replace no contact with a deliberate approach to self-respect, communication, and boundary setting, you shift the balance. You show not only your worth but your clarity of purpose. And in doing so, you become a force that others cannot help but reckon with. Today we will explore why silence is often a weak strategy, what you should do instead, and how these deliberate actions can profoundly transform the dynamic of any relationship. When you delve into the human psyche, you encounter patterns that often reflect avoidance rather than resolution. One such pattern is the popular notion of no contact, the idea that withdrawing from someone, often in silence, can be a means of gaining control or eliciting a reaction. On the surface, it seems like a calculated move, a way to shift the balance of power. But is it? Or does it merely mask a deeper insecurity, one that thrives on the hope that silence will achieve what words and actions could not? Silence is not inherently weak or strong. Its power lies in the intention behind it. If silence is used as a weapon, as a means of manipulation, it carries with it the seeds of resentment and misunderstanding. It may provoke a reaction, but the reaction is often shallow, driven by frustration or guilt, rather than genuine understanding or connection. And what kind of foundation can you build on such a response? Certainly not one of trust or mutual respect. In relationships, power is often misconstrued as dominance, as the ability to dictate the emotional tenor of the interaction. But real power, enduring power, comes from authenticity. It comes from being so anchored in your own values, your own worth, that you can communicate with clarity and confidence. To withdraw in silence, without the courage to articulate your needs or boundaries, is to sidestep the very challenges that could lead to growth, both for you and for the relationship. Let's take a step back and examine why no contact might feel so appealing. It offers a kind of escape, doesn't it? It allows you to avoid confrontation, to avoid the vulnerability of laying your thoughts and emotions bare. It gives you the illusion of control, the belief that your absence will force the other person to reflect, to miss you, to change. But here's the truth. Absence does not always lead to clarity. More often than not, it leads to confusion. And in that confusion, assumptions take root, assumptions that rarely align with the reality you were hoping to convey. True strength in relationships, and indeed in life, is not about avoidance. It's about engagement. It's about stepping into the discomfort of communication, even when it feels risky or difficult. It's about acknowledging your own needs and expressing them in a way that invites understanding rather than demanding submission. This is not to say that every relationship can or should be salvaged through dialogue. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away. But even in those instances, the clarity that comes from expressing yourself, from stating your reasons, your boundaries, your truth, is far more empowering than the murkiness of silent withdrawal. Now, let's consider what happens when you replace no contact with deliberate, intentional action. Instead of retreating, you take a stand. You communicate not from a place of anger or desperation, but from a place of self-respect. You say, "This is who I am, this is what I need, and this is what I cannot accept." Such statements are not easy to make. They require introspection, courage, and a willingness to face the possibility of rejection. But they also open the door to authenticity for you and for the other person. When you detach from the outcome, when you let go of the need to control how the other person responds, you discover a freedom that no contact could never provide. You are no longer bound by the hope that your silence will elicit the desired reaction. Instead, you are free to live in alignment with your values, to act in a way that reflects your integrity. And in doing so, you create a space where real connection can flourish, or where you can walk away with your dignity intact, knowing that you stayed true to yourself. It's also worth examining the broader implications of this approach. What kind of person do you become when you choose silence as a strategy? Are you someone who faces life's challenges head-on, or someone who retreats into the shadows, hoping others will do the heavy lifting of understanding and change? The former path is harder, undoubtedly. It demands more of you, more honesty, more resilience, more effort. But it is also the path of growth, of transformation, and in the end it is the path that leads to a more fulfilling life, one where you are not a passive participant but an active creator of your reality. As we move forward, let's explore what it looks like to act with intention, to communicate with courage, and to build relationships that are rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Because the truth is, the power of your voice, your actions, your clarity, it far outweighs the fleeting influence of silence. And when you embrace that power, you become someone who cannot be ignored, someone who commands respect, not through manipulation, but through the strength of your character. When we think of the human emotional landscape, we often overlook the profound interconnectedness of our actions and their psychological consequences. This is particularly true when we examine the act of retreat, of turning away from communication in favor of silence. For many, silence feels like an armor, a protective mechanism that shields them from vulnerability. But what we fail to consider is how often that same silence becomes a prison, locking us away from resolution, growth, and meaningful connection. Consider for a moment what happens internally when you choose to remain silent in the face of emotional turmoil. Initially, it feels empowering. It feels as though you are claiming control over a chaotic situation. But over time, that silence breeds something far more insidious. It breeds resentment. And not just toward the other person, but toward yourself. Because deep down, you know that you've avoided the real challenge, a challenge of confronting your own fears and insecurities, and of expressing what truly matters to you. Let us examine the emotional cost of avoidance. Humans are deeply social creatures wired for connection and understanding. When you withhold communication, you deny yourself the opportunity to clarify your intentions, to state your needs, and to establish your boundaries. Instead, you create a void, a space filled with assumptions, misunderstandings, and unspoken grievances. That void doesn't remain empty, it becomes a breeding ground for misinterpretation. What you think is a strategic withdrawal may be perceived as indifference or even disdain. And so, the very silence you intended as a means of gaining respect or control often achieves the opposite effect. But why do we choose silence in the first place? It is, in many ways, the easier option. It spares us from the discomfort of confrontation, from the fear of rejection, and from the vulnerability of admitting our own desires and limitations. Silence allows us to maintain the illusion of strength, even as it quietly undermines our relationships and our sense of self. It's a form of emotional procrastination, a way of putting off the difficult work of growth in favor of temporary comfort. Yet, like all forms of avoidance, it comes at a cost that compounds over time. The question then is not whether silence is ever appropriate. There are moments when stepping back, taking time to reflect, and giving space are essential. But this is not the same as retreating out of fear or using silence as a weapon. The distinction lies in intention. Are you stepping back to gain clarity and perspective? Or are you withdrawing to avoid the hard work of communication? Are you creating space for healing? Or are you fostering distance out of a desire for control? We must also consider the societal implications of silence as a strategy. In a world that often prioritizes appearances over authenticity, silence can be mistaken for sophistication or wisdom. But let's not confuse silence with strength. True strength is not the absence of action, but the willingness to engage, to face discomfort, to risk vulnerability, and to communicate with honesty and integrity. Strength lies in the courage to say, this is who I am, this is what I need, and this is what I cannot tolerate. Now let us delve into the psychological dynamics at play when silence is used as a form of control. There is a certain allure to the idea that withholding communication can compel someone to act in your favor. It feels like a power move, a way to shift the balance of the relationship. But this kind of manipulation is a double-edged sword. Even if it achieves the desired outcome in the short term, it undermines the foundation of trust and mutual respect. Relationships built on such shaky ground rarely stand the test of time. They crumble under the weight of unspoken expectations and unresolved tensions. It is crucial, then, to replace the mindset of avoidance with one of intentional engagement. This requires a shift in perspective, a recognition that the discomfort of communication is not a threat but an opportunity. It is an opportunity to clarify your values, to articulate your boundaries, and to foster a deeper understanding between yourself and the other person. This is not to say that every conversation will lead to resolution or reconciliation. Some relationships are simply not meant to endure. But even in those cases, the act of expressing yourself with clarity and respect leaves you with a sense of closure and self-respect that silence could never provide. The power of communication lies in its ability to transform not only your relationships but also your own sense of self. When you speak your truth, you affirm your worth. You signal to yourself and to others that your thoughts, feelings, and boundaries matter. This is not a trivial act, it is a profound declaration of self-respect. And when you act from a place of self-respect, you attract relationships that reflect that same respect back to you. So as we continue this journey of exploration, let us challenge the seductive simplicity of silence. Let us embrace the complexity, the messiness, and the vulnerability of authentic communication. Because it is through these moments of courage and connection that we grow not just as individuals but as human beings navigating the intricate dance of relationships. Let us move forward with intention, with integrity, and with the unwavering belief that our voices, our truths, and our actions have the power to shape our lives in meaningful and enduring ways. When you manipulate, you place yourself on dangerous ground. Manipulation often feels like control. It feels like a cunning strategy, a way to tilt the balance of power in your favor without anyone noticing. But beneath its surface lies a fragile structure, one that cannot bear the weight of genuine connection or enduring respect. In fact, manipulation erodes the very foundation upon which meaningful relationships are built. It is an act of self-sabotage disguised as self-preservation. Consider what manipulation really entails. At its core, it is the attempt to influence another person's thoughts, feelings, or actions without their consent or awareness. It relies on deceit, subtle coercion, or the withholding of vital information. You may think you're being strategic, but what you're really doing is undermining trust both in the relationship and in yourself. Because to manipulate is to deny the inherent dignity and autonomy of the other person. It reduces them to an object to be controlled rather than a partner to be understood and respected. Why do we resort to manipulation? Often it stems from fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of losing control. Manipulation becomes a coping mechanism, a way to shield ourselves from the discomfort of uncertainty. But in doing so, we create a hollow victory. Even if the manipulation succeeds in the short term, it leaves a residue of guilt, shame, and insecurity. Deep down, you know that your actions were not rooted in strength, but in weakness. And that knowledge eats away at your sense of self-worth. There is also a profound psychological toll on the person being manipulated. They may not fully understand what's happening, but they sense the imbalance. They feel the pressure, the subtle distortions of truth, the unspoken expectations. Over time, this creates a dynamic of mistrust and resentment. The manipulated individual begins to question their own perceptions, their own autonomy, and even their own value. This is not the foundation for a healthy, thriving relationship. It is the breeding ground for conflict and disconnection. Let us step back and ask a fundamental question. What kind of person do you want to be in your relationships? Do you want to be someone who inspires trust, respect, and admiration? Or do you want to be someone whose actions are driven by fear, control, and insecurity? The answer may seem obvious, but the path to achieving it is anything but easy. It requires a willingness to confront your own fears and to act with integrity even when it feels risky. True power in relationships does not come from manipulation. It comes from authenticity, from the courage to be honest about your desires, your boundaries, and your intentions. This kind of power is not about control, it is about influence. And influence is rooted in respect both for yourself and for the other person. When you act with integrity, you create a dynamic of mutual trust and understanding. This is the soil in which genuine connection grows. To reject manipulation is to embrace vulnerability. It is to acknowledge that you cannot control how others will respond to your truth. But it is also to recognize that their response is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to act in alignment with your values, to communicate with clarity and respect, and to maintain the integrity of your own character. This is not a weakness, it is a profound strength. We must also consider the broader implications of manipulation. In a society that often celebrates cunning and cleverness, it can be tempting to view manipulation as a skill, a mark of intelligence or sophistication. But this is a dangerous misconception. True intelligence lies not in the ability to deceive, but in the ability to connect, to understand the perspectives of others, to navigate conflict with grace, and to foster relationships that are rooted in mutual respect. When you manipulate, you create a world of pretense. But when you act with integrity, you create a world of possibility. This requires a shift in mindset. Instead of asking, how can I get what I want without risking rejection? Ask yourself, how can I express my needs in a way that honors both myself and the other person? Instead of focusing on control, focus on communication. Instead of seeking power over others, seek empowerment within yourself. This path is not without challenges. There will be moments of discomfort, moments of uncertainty, moments when you are tempted to retreat into old patterns of fear and control. But it is precisely in these moments that growth occurs. Each time you choose integrity over manipulation, you strengthen your character. You build a foundation of self-respect and self-trust that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. And so, as we continue to explore the complexities of human relationships, let us commit to a higher standard. Let us reject the hollow victories of manipulation and embrace the enduring power of authenticity. Let us cultivate relationships that are not built on control, but on connection. For it is through these relationships that we find not only fulfillment, but also the profound truth of what it means to be human. Avoidance is one of the great subtle tragedies of human behavior. It is a quiet, insidious force that undermines the foundation of our character and relationships. When we avoid emotional responsibility, when we shirk the difficult but necessary task of addressing our own shortcomings and fears, we create ripples of dysfunction not only within ourselves but in the lives of those we care about. This is not merely a failure of courage, it is a failure of integrity. To understand this dynamic, we must first recognize the nature of emotional responsibility. It is the willingness to confront the truth of our inner world, our insecurities, our disappointments, our failures, and our desires. Emotional responsibility demands that we own our reactions rather than attributing them solely to external circumstances or other people. This is not a task for the faint of heart. It is a rigorous and often painful process, but it is also the gateway to genuine strength and freedom. Why then do we avoid it? The answer lies in the allure of the short-term escape. When faced with discomfort, we instinctively seek ways to alleviate it, often through distraction, denial, or projection. We distract ourselves with superficial pleasures, deny the existence of our deeper struggles, or project our unresolved emotions onto others. In the moment, these strategies can feel like relief, but over time they exact a heavy toll. Consider the impact of avoidance on relationships. When you refuse to take responsibility for your emotions, you place an undue burden on those around you. You expect them to navigate the minefield of your unspoken fears and unaddressed insecurities, often without realizing it yourself. This creates an atmosphere of tension and mistrust as the other person is left guessing at the true source of conflict. Over time, the relationship becomes fraught with misunderstandings and unspoken resentment. Avoidance stunts personal growth. Each time you evade an emotional challenge, you miss an opportunity to develop resilience, self-awareness, and wisdom. Growth occurs at the edge of discomfort when you are willing to face the aspects of yourself that you would rather ignore. By avoiding these moments, you remain stuck in a cycle of stagnation, repeating the same patterns of behavior and wondering why your circumstances never seem to improve. There is also a broader societal dimension to this issue. In a culture that increasingly prioritizes comfort and convenience, emotional avoidance is often normalized. We are surrounded by messages that encourage us to numb our pain, to distract ourselves from our struggles, and to seek external validation rather than internal clarity. But this normalization comes at a cost. It creates a collective inability to address the deeper issues that underlie our individual and societal challenges. So what does it mean to embrace emotional responsibility? It begins with self-reflection. You must be willing to look inward, to examine the roots of your emotions with honesty and humility. This is not an exercise in self-judgment, but in self-understanding. When you recognize that your anger is rooted in fear, or that your jealousy is a manifestation of insecurity, you gain the power to respond in a way that is constructive rather than reactive. Emotional responsibility also requires clear communication. It means expressing your feelings and needs openly, rather than expecting others to decipher your unspoken expectations. This is not about demanding that others cater to your emotions, but about inviting them into a dialogue of mutual respect and understanding. When you communicate with clarity and vulnerability, you create the conditions for genuine connection and collaboration. Emotional responsibility involves setting boundaries not only with others but with yourself. You must learn to distinguish between what is within your control and what is not. You cannot control how others will react to your honesty, but you can control your own actions and attitudes. This is where true power lies, not in manipulating external circumstances, but in mastering your internal responses. The journey toward emotional responsibility is not a linear path. It is a process of trial and error, of progress and setbacks. There will be moments when you fall back into old patterns of avoidance, when the weight of emotional honesty feels too heavy to bear. But these moments are not failures. They are opportunities to recommit to the path of growth. Each step you take, no matter how small, strengthens your capacity for courage and integrity. And let us not overlook the rewards of this journey. When you take responsibility for your emotions, you free yourself from the tyranny of blame and victimhood. You reclaim your agency, recognizing that you have the power to shape your experience of the world. This does not mean that life will always be easy or fair, but it does mean that you will face its challenges with a sense of purpose and strength. In the end, emotional responsibility is not just a personal endeavor, it is a moral imperative. It is the foundation of trust, respect, and compassion. By embracing this responsibility, you contribute not only to your own well-being, but to the well-being of those around you. You create a ripple effect of honesty and integrity, inspiring others to confront their own truths and to build relationships that are grounded in authenticity. As we continue this discussion, let us consider the specific steps we can take to cultivate emotional responsibility in our daily lives. Let us examine the habits and mindsets that support this endeavor, and let us commit to the ongoing work of self-discovery and growth. For it is in this work that we find not only the key to our own fulfillment, but also the foundation of a better world. Consistency is one of the most undervalued virtues in our modern world. It is quiet, unassuming, and often overlooked in favor of more dramatic displays of competence or charisma. Yet, it is the bedrock of trust, the foundation upon which meaningful relationships and lasting achievements are built. To be consistent is not merely to repeat the same actions day after day. It is to align your actions with your values and to do so in a way that is predictable and reliable. Why does consistency matter so much? Consider the nature of trust. Trust is not something that can be conjured in a single moment or through a grand gesture. It is cultivated over time, through a series of small, dependable actions. When someone is consistent, they communicate a powerful message: I am here, I am reliable, and I am who I claim to be. This message resonates deeply because it provides a sense of security and stability in an uncertain world. In relationships, consistency is the glue that holds people together. It is not enough to express love or commitment in words. Those words must be backed by actions that are steady and unwavering. When you show up for someone day after day, through both good times and bad, you demonstrate that your care for them is not contingent on circumstances or fleeting emotions. This kind of reliability is rare and precious, and it fosters a bond that can withstand the tests of time and adversity. But consistency is not only about how we relate to others, it is also about how we relate to ourselves. At its core, consistency is a form of self-respect. When you commit to a goal or a value and you follow through on that commitment, you affirm your own integrity. You prove to yourself that you are capable of setting a standard and living up to it. This builds self-trust, which is an essential component of confidence and resilience. Of course, consistency is not easy. It requires discipline, perseverance, and a willingness to endure discomfort. There will be days when the effort feels tedious or thankless, when the temptation to take shortcuts or to give up entirely is strong. But it is precisely in these moments that the value of consistency becomes clear. When you persist despite the challenges, you cultivate a strength of character that cannot be easily shaken. Let us consider the practical implications of consistency in various areas of life. In the realm of personal development, Consistency is what transforms fleeting inspiration into lasting change. It is one thing to decide that you want to improve your health, for example, and another thing entirely to follow through on that decision day after day, meal after meal, workout after workout. Progress is not made in giant leaps, but in small, steady steps. In the professional world, consistency is often the difference between mediocrity and excellence. Talent may open doors, but it is consistency that keeps them open. Employers, colleagues, and clients value individuals who can be counted on to deliver quality work time and time again. This reliability builds a reputation that is more valuable than any single achievement. Even in the realm of influence, consistency plays a crucial role. People are far more likely to be persuaded by someone who practices what they preach, who embodies the principles they espouse. When your actions align with your words, you demonstrate authenticity, which is a powerful and rare quality. This kind of integrity not only earns respect, but also inspires others to follow your example. But let us not idealize consistency without acknowledging its challenges. To be consistent is to commit to a path, and that commitment often requires sacrifice. It means saying no to distractions, resisting the pull of instant gratification, and staying the course even when the rewards are not immediately apparent. This is why consistency must be grounded in a clear sense of purpose. When you know why you are something, when you understand its deeper significance, it becomes easier to sustain the effort required. There is also a danger in rigidly adhering to consistency without allowing room for growth or adaptation. True consistency is not about stubbornly clinging to the same methods or routines. It is about remaining faithful to your principles while being open to new ways of living them out. This requires humility and a willingness to learn. As we reflect on the role of consistency in our lives, let us ask ourselves some important questions. What commitments have we made to ourselves and to others? And are we honoring those commitments? Are there areas where we have allowed inconsistency to undermine our integrity or our relationships? And what steps can we take to cultivate greater consistency in the areas that matter most? Consistency is not glamorous, but it is transformative. It is the quiet, persistent force that shapes our character, builds our relationships, and enables us to achieve our goals. It is the discipline of aligning our actions with our values day after day, moment after moment. And it is through this discipline that we discover not only who we are, but who we are capable of becoming. Vulnerability is a term often misinterpreted and consequently misunderstood. In a world that glorifies strength, control, and independence, vulnerability can appear as weakness or as an admission of defeat. But this perception could not be further from the truth. To embrace vulnerability is not to surrender, but to summon profound courage. It is an act of standing not in armor but exposed, trusting that the power to prevail does not lie in perfection, but in authenticity. When we examine the essence of vulnerability, what do we find? It is the willingness to confront uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. These are conditions inherent in every meaningful human endeavor. To create something of value, to form deep connections, to pursue significant goals, all of these require stepping into the unknown, risking failure, rejection, and pain. Without vulnerability, there is no creativity, no trust, no love. Why then do so many of us resist vulnerability? The answer lies in fear. We fear judgment, loss, and the possibility that we are not enough. This fear drives us to construct barriers, to hide our true selves behind masks of competence or invulnerability. But these defenses, while offering the illusion of safety, come at a steep cost. They isolate us, preventing genuine connection with others and with ourselves. They keep us confined within the narrow limits of what feels certain and comfortable, robbing us of the opportunity to grow. To embrace vulnerability is to acknowledge that fear, but to move forward anyway. It is to recognize that the things we value most, authenticity, intimacy, achievement, cannot be attained without risk. This is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one. For it is through vulnerability that we find not only our strength, but also our freedom. Let us consider for a moment the role of vulnerability in relationships. Intimacy is built not on perfection, but on authenticity. To be truly seen and accepted, we must first allow ourselves to be seen, flaws and all. This requires the courage to admit our needs, to express our feelings, and to face the possibility of rejection. But it is precisely this courage that creates the conditions for deep connection. When we show up as our true selves, we invite others to do the same. Vulnerability is equally important in leadership and influence. A leader who admits their mistakes, who shares their struggles, inspires far more trust and respect than one who projects an image of unshakable infallibility. Why? Because honesty is relatable. It demonstrates humility and a willingness to grow, qualities that foster loyalty and cooperation. Vulnerability, in this context, is not a liability but a source of strength. The same principle applies to personal growth. To improve, we must first acknowledge where we fall short. This requires an honest assessment of our weaknesses, our fears, and our limitations. It means being willing to ask for help, to accept feedback, and to try again after failure. This process is uncomfortable, but it is also transformative. It is through vulnerability that we learn, adapt, and ultimately succeed. But how do we cultivate the courage to be vulnerable? The first step is to reframe our understanding of vulnerability itself. Instead of viewing it as a weakness, we must see it as a form of strength. It takes far more courage to face uncertainty than to avoid it, far more strength to admit our fears than to deny them. By embracing vulnerability, we affirm our humanity, our resilience, and our capacity for growth. The second step is to practice vulnerability in small ways. Share a fear or a hope with a trusted friend. Admit a mistake and apologize sincerely. Take a risk in pursuing a goal that matters to you. Each of these actions, though seemingly small, builds the courage and confidence to embrace vulnerability in more significant ways. Finally, we must be patient with ourselves. Vulnerability is not a one-time decision, but a lifelong practice. There will be times when we retreat behind our defenses, and that is okay. What matters is that we continue to strive for authenticity, to step forward even when it feels uncomfortable. As we reflect on the role of vulnerability in our lives, let us ask ourselves, where are we holding back out of fear? What would it look like to show up more authentically in our relationships, our work, and our personal growth? And how might our lives change if we embrace the strength in vulnerability? This is not a call to reckless exposure or to abandon all boundaries. Vulnerability must be tempered with discernment, shared with those who have earned our trust. But when practiced wisely, it becomes a source of profound connection, transformation, and strength. In this exploration of vulnerability, we see that it is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. It is not about being unshakable, but about being authentic. And it is through this authenticity that we find not only our true selves, but also the courage to live fully and meaningfully. Let us now delve into how vulnerability intertwines with resilience and transformation as the journey continues.